At the edge of a farmer's field in the west of Ireland sits a cave that can be accessed through a small opening, and as you crawl through the cool mud deeper and deeper into the womb of the earth, you eventually reach a bottom, a depth that you can stand up in, taste the salt of the rock and feel the presence of the other. This cave is called Owenega, or the Cave of Cats, and is said to be the birthplace of Samhain festival, what we now know as Halloween. There is so much folklore and tradition associated with this cave, and it's said to be the dwelling place of the Morrigan, the crow goddess. On Samhain night, it is said that the cave becomes a portal to the other world and allows spirits to come into this realm. So what else can we learn about Halloween from history? Let's explore in this video. So in this video, we're going to be taking a closer look at the history of Halloween. Everything from Celtic tradition, a little bit of the Roman influence and Christian influence as well, and how we got to the Halloween that we know and love today. And I'll just apologise because my voice is just not very good, and I'll probably be coughing like every 5 seconds, so I'll be cutting this video when I need to do that. I've just had a really bad cold. But I wanted to get this video out anyway and talk about Halloween, so let's do it. And I just want to put a disclaimer as well that in these kind of historical folk tradition type videos, I try to talk about things that have got a lot of historical evidence surrounding them, and just really be clear that these are very broad strokes. There is so much history that we just simply don't know, and so much localized tradition as well. So when I say they did this in Ireland, that's a very broad generalization. Every single community would have variations like they do today, and England, Scotland, Wales, every community has their own little things, and they still do today. A lot of places down south in England have very different traditions than the north, for example, but I'm talking broad strokes, otherwise this video will be 10 hours long. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there, and I'm also talking really about European Halloween here as well. I'm not qualified to talk on these kind of traditions for the rest of the world, even though there are absolutely beautiful history, culture, traditions, stories. So I'm sure there's other people on YouTube talking about that. Definitely worth a watch, not the person to be telling you about it. So that's out of the way. Let's start with Celtic traditions. So a lot of what we now know as Halloween comes from Celtic traditions of Samhain. And Samhain typically starts on sunset on the 31st of October. And in the Celtic Irish tradition, they didn't have autumn and spring, so the year was just summer and winter. And this date, this time of year, marks the transition from summer into winter. So we're now coming into the dark half of the year. A lot of people also say that this time of year is the beginning of the Celtic New Year, actually. So to start the new year, it's the end of the harvest, we're going into the dark half of the year. It's a very big time of transition and shift. So the things that I'm going to be talking about here are things that we have seen the most across different communities and see cropping up again and again in history, different traditions and beliefs, and that have brought us to where we are today. So this time of the year was believed to be a liminal time, a thin time, which essentially just means that the veil between our world and the other world is thin. So it was believed to be a time of year when the spirits and the dead would walk the earth openly, and you'd be able to communicate with them. And a lot of ancestor remembrance was done at this time of year as well. So we've just had the lovely harvest, we're finishing off the harvest season. It was traditional to have a feast or just a meal and set out a place for your ancestors as well who have passed away, and a time to remember them or communicate with them and think about them. But it wasn't all fun and games with the dead walking the earth. And this is where we get a lot of the traditions around costumes and masks from, because some of the spirits were evil or negative or just tricksters. They things that you didn't want in your home or in your life. So wearing masks, costumes, doing these kinds of things to scare off these negative spirits was also something that was done in a lot of communities. Because it's a thin time, it's a time for divination, different types of scrying, foretelling the future. Things like that were also very common at this time of year. It is another fire festival, so it was traditional to have bonfires and fires, things like that as well. Ireland is also where we get the idea of carving something, pumpkin carving, but this was turnip carving. The pumpkin is not native to Ireland or the UK, it's an American thing. Significantly easier to carve, I will say, but a turnip is the traditional. So a story first appeared in print in the 19th century. It could be a lot older, an Irish folk tale, who knows when from. Though it does talk about the devil, so there's obvious Christian influence in this story. And the story is about Stingy Jack, who was just a little bit of an unsavoury character, up to no good. Stingy Jack invited the devil to have a drink with him, and then he didn't want to pay, so he somehow convinced the devil to turn into a coin that he could use to buy the drinks with. However, he then put the devil coin in his pocket with a silver cross so that he couldn't turn back. Eventually he agreed that he would let the devil out if he would leave him alone for a year and not claim him and take him to hell when he died. So he did that. Then Stingy Jack tricks the devil again, convinces him to climb into a tree to get some fruit, carves a cross into the tree so he can't come down. Eventually he says, I'll let you come down and I'll get rid of the cross if you don't bother me for 10 years and you don't claim my soul when I die. Again. So after Jack died, God didn't want his soul. He didn't want such a character in heaven, and the devil was true to his word, did not want Stingy Jack in hell either. So he sent Jack off into the night with a burning coal, and in the story he puts the coal into a carved out turnip and uses that to light his way and guide his way. And he's been roaming the earth with it ever since. And that is where we get the term jack-o'-lantern. And there's a lot of figures like this in Irish folktales. Will-o'-the-wisp, things like that, mysterious lights in the moors in the bog, and this is one of those ones, and that's where we get the jack-o'-lantern from. So in the 1800s there was an absolutely devastating famine in Ireland, and I actually went to the famine museum when I was in Ireland, and it was one of the most harrowing places I have ever been. It was very hard to walk around and see everything, to be honest. Essentially the English landowners made the Irish farmers under their control grow only potatoes because the English love potatoes and they wanted to send them back over to England. It was a horrible system, and unfortunately for multiple years there was a blight on the potato crop, which is like a fungal problem where all the potatoes went black across Ireland, and this was absolutely devastating because these people had been made to only grow potatoes. There was literally nothing to eat. So many people died. It was awful. And as part of this as well, a lot of Irish people were made to move to the US. Some of them wanted to go, most of them did not want to go. They were separated from family and loved ones, dragged onto the boats. They didn't want to be there at all. They were terrified. The boats were absolutely horrific as well. So many people died on the journey. But that's why so many Irish people ended up in the US in the 1800s. And so a lot of these traditions came over, embedded themselves into American modern culture, I guess, as we know it, and this is kind of like where we come to with Halloween. So a lot of these traditions around dressing up, the turnip carving or the pumpkin carving, all these kinds of things being brought over by the Irish. A lot of Irish traditions also come over into England. Wales and Scotland have their own traditions as well. There seems to be these kind of similar veins throughout, a lot of them: ancestors, harvest, spirits, these kind of things. So just going back in time a little bit now to just show you how, I guess, widespread all these influences are and how everything affects everything else and everything in the world is just a big mishmash. The Romans invaded Britain. How many times do you think about the Roman Empire per day? Quite a lot, actually. So the Romans had their own festivals, gods and goddesses and things like that before Christianity. So they had Feralia, which was a harvest autumn festival, which was dedicated to honouring the dead. They also had Pomona, which was all about the goddess of fruit trees. And you can say maybe this influenced the tradition of bombing for apples, things like that. We don't really know, but we do know that it's such a mixture of cultures and everything just influencing everything all over the place. So in England, there was a big conversion effort by the church when Christianity started growing in popularity. Particularly in the 7th century, there was a lot of work done to get pagans on board with Christian beliefs and Christian ideologies. So a really good way for them to do this was by adopting pagan places of worship and celebrations, festivals, things like that, to make it feel more familiar and make them more accepting of it. And one of the ones was Samhain. So they had All Saints' Day, which was on May the 13th. And this was a day where I think it was originally called the Feast of All Holy Martyrs or something. So they would be remembering the dead on that day. In 837 AD, Pope Gregory IV changed the name to All Saints' Day and moved the date to November the 1st to align with this pagan tradition of remembering the dead, this time of year, these dates, but bringing the Christian influence into it. Another word for this day was All Hallows Day, and then the day before it, the 31st, became All Hallows Eve, Halloween. So this is how easy it is for things to just shift within culture, and then before you know it, we've got people buying 9 million pumpkins for their house and making pumpkin spice everything. So All Souls Day was a day to remember those who departed. So one of the traditions that came around at this time was souling, which was where the poor people in the community would go and knock on the doors of those who were a bit better off and offer to pray for the souls of those who had died in their family. So in return, they would give them soul cakes, which was like a little cake, biscuit type thing, baked with spices and fruits, kind of like a shortbread. And I'm gonna make some later in this video, so keep watching if you're interested in that, because we'll be making some soul cakes. But this is another contributor to where we get trick-or-treating from. There's a lot of other small kind of varying traditions from area to area. Some communities would leave food or treats outside in a belief that it would appease some of the ill-mannered spirits. So this could be another contributor to trick-or-treating. Some places also had Mischief Night, particularly Northern England and Scotland. So this would be a night where people would just get up to hijinks, really. Practical jokes, knocking on doors, running away, all these kinds of things. And it's interesting actually because I'm in Northern England, obviously from my accent. And I remember this even in my childhood, and I think it probably still happens now, of people egging houses on Halloween. That was a big thing. Egging your car, yeah, knocking on doors, running away, as well as trick-or-treating. I remember all of those things happening. So it's interesting that, yeah, I'm like, oh, for God's sake, someone's egged the window, and you know, it's all these old traditions that have been going on for who knows how long. So as the years went by, Halloween sort of declined a bit in interest, especially in the 19th, 20th century. People weren't really that bothered about it anymore, particularly in Britain. A lot of this was to do with the Protestant Reformation and not really being interested in these Catholic holidays, which is funny, and all these kinds of things. And then recently it's kind of had a resurgence. A lot of this is definitely down to the US. England tends to just watch what the US is doing from afar and be like, I want to do that as well. So it definitely has had a resurgence. The US is like crazy with every kind of seasonal celebration. I can't believe how much pumpkin stuff you can buy in the US. It's absolutely wild. It's not like that in England really. There's a few things, but definitely hasn't caught up to that. So there's definitely a resurgence going on. And what I wanted to do was finish the video by talking about some different things that you could do to carry on some of these older traditions. Maybe the idea of all this commercialism and buying all this stuff doesn't quite sit right with you at this time of year, and you want to come back to some of those traditional beliefs about abundance, gratitude, honouring the dead, these kinds of things. So I'm just going to give you a couple of ideas of things that you could do to celebrate this time of year. So the first one is simply to have some kind of feast. Really celebrate the abundance of the harvest and how fortunate you are to be able to get access to these foods. You can do it with friends and family or just yourself really. It doesn't have to be too extravagant, but remember to set out a place for your ancestor as well. Another thing that you could do is bake soul cakes, which I'm going to do right now. So let's go to the kitchen and bake some soul cakes. Ancestor remembrance in general is really key to this time of year, which I always find quite strange, I guess, because I don't really know much about my family more than one, barely two generations back. So I don't have specific people in mind that I think about. So I try to just think about my ancestors generally. But if you have particular people who might have passed on, things like that, then it's a nice time to, you know, get those old photos out, maybe write them a letter, all these types of things just to remember them as well. Lighting a fire is a lovely way to welcome in this new year. And I was going to light a fire and do the first fire of autumn for this video, but it's actually not that cold for some reason. We had a crazy storm yesterday, Storm Babette. It was wild, but it's like weirdly not cold. So I'm reserving the wood, I apologise. But you can light a fire or even light a candle and things like that. It's all about what it represents. I mentioned divination. This could be a good time to do actually fire scrying, so having a look into the fire and seeing if there's anything that you can see, any images, themes, stuff like that. Anything to do with divination, runes, pendulum, tarot, anything that kind of calls to you that you're interested in, give it a go. And then lastly, I want you to try and carve a turnip, because it's traditional and a lot of people have been doing it for a long time, so it's a bit tough, but just get in there, carve the turnip, and then you can use the filling for something nice, pie or mash or something like that. And I was going to carve a turnip for this video, I swear. I even went to the shop and had a look, but they were really small, like smaller than this, so I just thought it's not really going to work properly. But if you can, give it a go. If not, pumpkins are there as well, give that a go. And just remember, with all of these things, there's no hard and fast rules. That's the beauty of history and folklore and belief. It's very personal and it's community led, and if you don't have a community, that's fine, everyone's here online as well. And you just do what you feel is right and kind of follow your heart with it as well. So my voice managed to survive this video, I'm quite impressed. But I hope you've enjoyed hearing about some of the histories and traditions that have brought us to the modern Halloween. I already know there'll be so many things that I've missed out, so if you have any extra tidbits, information to add, feel free to put them in the comments as always, and let me know what you're doing this Halloween, this Samhain. What are you going to be doing to celebrate? I would love to know. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope that I will see you in the next video. Bye.